March 31st, 2006. It's a night just the same as every other. Nothing different, nothing strange. That is until one man ventures out to take on the town. He's celebrating with his friends the coming spring break, and this is a man who has more reason to celebrate than most, as he's already on the fast track of becoming a doctor. In the state of Ohio, it's not much of an interesting place to be. In fact, outside of the occasional tragic event, it's a place known mostly as a flyover state, the butt of a joke. It's a place to retire, or more so, a place to fade away. Though tonight, the latter description couldn't have been more true. As night turns to morning, and myth fades to legend, and some famous footage is born. Captured on security tape, a man enters a bar, the Ugly Tuna in Columbus. But once he makes his way inside, that's it.
The man is never heard from
again.
When it comes to missing persons in Ohio, there is one name that probably resonates more than any other: Brian Shaffer. His case has the makings of a Hollywood movie. A young medical student last seen going up this escalator to a popular campus area bar, but video never showed him leaving.
This was the fate of 27-year-old Brian Shaffer, a medical student from Ohio State University. A man whose disappearance has left millions of people scratching their heads. How does one vanish in plain sight? It's a pondering question, but 2 decades later and we still have no definitive information. Some police theories involve more benign ideas, like Brian being able to slip out of the bar undetected, relocating himself and donning a new identity, trying to escape the perils of his life, possibly even the grief left in him after losing his mother to cancer. But other ideas involve, shall we say, more sinister interpretations, such as Brian Shaffer being yet another victim of the infamous smiley face killers.
I think the most important piece of this is actually the clusters that you were talking about. You know, the reality is we are going to have accidental drownings. That it happens. There's no question about that. But what is very unusual here are these clusters that you mentioned, and the fact that it really coincides with that 1-year break that you mentioned in Chicago. And really during that 1-year break is when those clusters picked back up in Austin. And look, I'm a very pragmatic, logical person. I do not ascribe to conspiracy theories, but I'm sorry, there's just too many coincidences here and the same type of demographic of the victims that are appearing in these clusters.
An infamous theory proposed after 45 bodies of young men were found between the 90s and 2000s, all drowned across the Midwest, with the same demographic and same pattern. But that's the thing. Even that in itself has not been definitively proven. No matter how you look at it, and no matter how you slice it, the Brian Shaffer case is nothing more than a vanishing act. A man who stepped outside of reality. 1 minute a patron at a bar, the next a legend, a scary story to tell in the dark, where hundreds of questions arise from their story, but no answers are available. Nothing to settle our anxious curiosity. The world is a strange place, An easy thing to forget when you live in the comfort of the first world. Here we have structure, society, and the issues we typically face in our day-to-day are issues that are easy to understand. From the simple dramas like arguing with your best friends, or maybe something a bit more extreme like wars between nations. These issues may bring on their own set of fears, but at the end of the day, they are normal, they're human, and most importantly, they're understandable. I think the near endless amount of content around the web that flaunts and dives into the horrible, the unknown, and the scary stories we ourselves invent really says a lot. It says everything to me, at least. And that's that, as people, we like to be scared. For some odd reason, we crave that age-old fear of the dark. Hence our enjoyment of games such as Amnesia: The Dark Descent, or watching movies about depraved people and the violence that they commit, such as I Saw the Devil. But that's just the fictional realm. If you truly want to see just how strange, eerie, and outright scary everything can be, you need not look further than one simple search term. 2 fun little words. Unsolved Mysteries. The rabbit hole of Unsolved Mysteries is a treasure trove of unnerving stories that once you begin to look into, you can't really look back. From the obviously mundane to the completely unexplainable, there's a good reason so many find themselves staring into that abyss. So that's what we're here for today. To open up Pandora's box, to peek behind the curtain, and see just what stares back at us. So, dear viewer, let's take a dive into the unknown, and let's explore the unsolved.
The Max Headroom Hijacking. Hi, Max Headroom here with... This is my guest. I heard you were big time in the old pop biz. Well, I'm going to take that as a no comment. So, nitty-gritty time. What I'm talking about, and you're not, is that more people prefer the new refreshing taste of Coke over Pepsi. Sweating? It's true. More people are, as we Cokeologists say, catching the wave. Catch it if you can. Catch the wave. Coke.
And good evening from Chicago. I'm Tom Skilling. National Weather Service radar shows storms through the south suburban areas. Moving southeastward close up, you'll see that we still have some dark areas inside this area.
It's 9 o'clock at night. The news is buzzing in the background of your room as you attempt to relax, escaping the day's stresses. As the clock strikes 9:14 though, suddenly, everything falls silent, and the TV goes black before flickering back to life and returning with this. The 1987 Max Headroom incident is probably the most infamous TV hijacking in history. Widely discussed across the internet and referenced in the media, the Max Headroom incident was a case of station jacking, pulled off when the idea of hacking was much rarer and harder of a concept to really understand. While in modern times we don't run into this sort of thing too often, as traditional TV is not really a major facet in our daily lives anymore. But to think of it in an equivalency, think about watching a YouTuber or streamer that you really like, having their accounts hacked, and someone else broadcasting or posting videos from it. Though even this pales in comparison to the way it would have felt to see on TV back in the 80s. The major difference here is that unlike simply collecting someone's passwords through a data breach or brute forcing your way into someone's account, the idea of signal jacking is a much harder task to undertake, let alone understand for the everyman, especially back during the 80s. Though this would be nearly impossible to pull off today, cable and TV now mostly relies on digital satellite transmissions. Though before satellite, it was all done through these little broadcast towers on top of buildings. And this meant that you had to have transmitters that were able to catch and overpower signals being transmitted from these towers in order to actually quote-unquote hijack it and play your own broadcast. The broadcast of the Max Headroom incident was simple. It was a man parodying the, at the time, popular Max Headroom character, and overall just nervously talking, mocking the TV hosts, and speaking in an almost choked up voice due to just how surprised of the hijacking actually being successful was for them. Though the most notable part of the Max Headroom incident is when the mask-wearing host decides to get up, and he pulls his ass out for his friend to start spanking. As funny as it is, it's not long after this that the broadcast would return to its regularly scheduled programming and the incident was over. While this situation in of itself is not all that disturbing in any real way, it is one of those mysteries that sticks in the back of your head due to just how strange it is, especially the more you look deeper into it. This wasn't the internet age. This wasn't a time when anyone with enough computer knowledge and hacking skill can take an entire building of scammers down and break into their CCTV cameras. In fact, at this point, computers were still in their DOS and Amiga phase. Very basic and just usually characters on a flat screen. You gotta remember, back in the 80s, video games outside of arcades were on the NES, and the best looking games looked like this. So whoever these hackers who took over the signal were had to be incredibly technically skilled, as well as have access to expensive and intricate equipment that would be necessary to pull off such a feat. Now double that with the fact that given the technicalities of how to do something like this, it had to mean that these guys were fairly close to the source of the broadcast, meaning in the direct Chicago area just a few buildings away from the original broadcast. Though when the police would later investigate, no names or any real leads would turn up. And to this day, almost 40 years later, no one has ever taken credit or claimed responsibility for the incident. The Max Headroom hijacking itself is just odd. And even the contents of it, aside from it possibly just being a prank or even an exercise in seeing just what you could accomplish as a hacker, there doesn't seem to be any clear reason or message to be gleaned from this event. There was no real statement made or message given, just ramblings of mockery, ramblings of, well, inappropriate hilarity. But that's just it. It's that part that makes the whole thing so strange. Because after 5 years and the statute of limitations taking effect, there's no risk involved in getting caught at this point. And who wouldn't want to be known for the greatest, if not the most famous TV hijacking of all time? Who was the Max Headroom hijacker?
Isdal Woman.
Norway, a cold nation of Northern Europe. Norway is one of those countries that's both quiet and unassuming, yet is also one that's infamous to those who are more interested into the macabre, due to some of its more, we'll say, famous incidents, such as the infamous church burnings and overall story of the 90s black metal scene, probably best remembered for when two psychopathic musicians crossed paths, resulting in the enduring yet disgusting story of Mayhem and the murder of its founding member. at the hands of Varg Vikernes. Though that's a story for another day. In the unassuming city of Bergen, a cold November morning took place in 1970. A father and his 2 children were on a hike, venturing through the hills, until the 3 eventually stumbled across a horrifying sight. The charred remains of a woman. Not long after this, the police would begin to investigate, surveying the devastation, unknowingly opening a case that would end up being etched into the annals of history. As the more they profiled the crime scene, and the more they examined the body, the more odd and disturbing it became. One of the most notable aspects of the woman's corpse was its position, lying face up, as if she was either placed there or laid down willingly, her face destroyed beyond any recognition, something that would end up becoming a theme to come. Around her body was traces of burnt paper and a torched hat. A hat that would be found to have traces of gasoline on it, making it abundantly clear that this act was no accident. Not far from the body were the remnants of a campfire, and near it were the scattered items, including a bottle of liquor, rubber boots, nylon stockings, a purse with a passport holder, and most chillingly, a matchbox. In an article from ATI, they have some choice quotes from one of the officers who was part of the search party. "We notice is the stench," ahhh said. "I remember we were walking and sometimes clanging up the scree slope. As we hurry along, I'm wondering where we are heading for, because it all seems so steep and impassable. This is no hiking trail, that's for sure." When they reached the body, they began tossing around theories. Some officers wondered whether the woman had fallen into a fire and launched herself backwards in panic. Others wondered if there was a murderer lurking somewhere in the forest. "It's not a pretty sight," ahhh said. "The question is whether someone set her on fire, or if there are other causes." This alone is already a gruesome situation. But where it turns to legendary is, like most of these stories, in its lack of any true conclusion. The investigation would only lead to more questions, as eyewitness accounts of the woman would garner little to no helpful description. And with a lack of identity and a lack of useful information, as well as the cryptic and almost ritualistic way the crime scene looked, it just made it all the more enigmatic and chilling. A few days after the body was found, investigators were able to find 2 suitcases that supposedly belonged to the woman at a local railway station. Inside it, they would find Deutschmark notes, or in layman's terms, German money, along with various clothing, wigs, makeup, prescription-free glasses, and eczema cream. Things that would already seem suspicious. But it was through her collection of passports with various identities and addresses on them that would cause this mystery to become even more of a twisted rabbit hole. Especially when police would later talk with hotels, and they told us stories about how a woman who fit her description would check in only to regularly change rooms. Just who was this woman? And why was she found dead or possibly killed in such a gruesome and suspicious manner? The police would officially label her death a likely suicide, though this theory has always rung rather hollow due to the nature of her death and the findings surrounding it, given the time period in her disguises, as well as the foreign money and just about everything else found within her belongings. There's been speculation that she was a spy, and given that this was the early era of the Cold War, it's actually a pretty plausible theory. But then again, that's just speculation. As it stands now in the 5 decades that have passed, the cause of the Isdal woman's fate and even her very identity still remain a mystery. She was given a proper burial in an unmarked grave. May anyone who does know who she is come to visit and pay their respects. But I guess, in this case, the only thing definitive about it is all we truly know about the Isdal woman is her final resting place.
Quakes. And the same hour was there, a great earthquake, and the 10th part of the city fell, and in the earthquake were slain of men 7,000, and the remnant were affrighted, and gave glory to the God of heaven. The second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly. And the 7th angel sounded, and there were great voices in heaven, saying, The kingdoms of the world are become the kingdoms of our Lord, and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever. And the 24 elders which sat before God on their seats fell upon their faces, and worshipped God, saying, We give thee thanks, O Lord God Almighty, which art and wast and art to come, because thou hast taken thee thy great power, and hast resigned.
But right now, nobody knows where the noise came from. It's the sound heard all around Scottsdale. A number of home security cameras captured the big boom that rocked several Scottsdale neighborhoods over the weekend.
There was a flash.
And he's heard from homeowners who felt it as far north as Shea Boulevard. He's looked at his security camera footage over and over again and still can't figure out what it was that woke all his neighbors up.
Taking a step back from the macabre and simply into the unknown, skyquakes are an interesting little rabbit hole. Whether they are an elaborate hoax, a genuinely strange phenomena, or something that we don't really know. All we do actually know is that sometimes we hear strange things from the sky, and they leave us with more questions than answers. I mean, how would you feel if you were minding your own business only to hear a loud boom emanating from the sky? Yet as you look up into it, you find nothing. Just the clouds floating above. No sign of its source, no sign of a disturbance. It would probably leave you with a cold chill on your spine. Like when we venture into the woods or we are alone in our house and something shifts. There's a noise you can't explain, something you see out of the corner of your eye in the forest. You can't prove anything was there, but you saw it or you heard it. And the unknown of it just freaks you out. These are the sort of events that people fall into strange mental delusions over, thinking it's the sounding of the 7th trumpet, or it's God's wrath and we are about to be torn asunder on this earth, or, aliens are flying overhead, cloaking themselves from sight, yet unable to dampen the sound of their ships, apparently. Outlandish theories. But when fear hits you, rationality tends to leave the premises. It's just the natural course of being afraid. And that's how these skyquakes, as they're called, tend to evoke people. They tend to bring out the primal fear of the unknown. And I won't even say it's for a bad reason. Again, if you heard this,
A home surveillance camera in Mount Laurel captured that loud noise.
wouldn't you be a little startled?
The bizarre atmospheric boom noises, generally known as skyquakes, have occurred all over the world, from Bangladesh to Belgium, Northern Ireland to South Australia, and Germany to Japan. This widespread occurrence has fueled a variety of explanations, ranging from atmospheric conditions to seismic activity and even top-secret military operations, yet no single theory has ever been agreed upon. There are accounts of unexplained sounds from the sky that date back to ancient times. Historical texts and legends from various cultures have described phenomena that could be interpreted as skyquakes, including loud, unexplained noises from the heavens. One of the earliest documented reports was from an island in the Adriatic Sea in 1824, while in 1896, a skyquake was heard in the western New York town of Franklinville, around 50 miles from the shores of Lake Erie.
These events have happened for quite a long time, and obviously to some could lead to an obsession to finding out just what they are, or to a more superstitious mind, fear of just what could be causing them. Though this is only broaching the loud booms and the shaking. The side that tends to be a bit more terrifying is when the phenomena transitioned and began to sound more like this.
Vai fazer Miguel. سلامي لما Evita el teléfono.
Now that's far more eerie, isn't it? But if I'm being honest, it's not really the skyquakes here where things get to be truly strange and kind of freaky. I mean, again, strange noises and all that, they are scary. They can evoke genuine fear. But when there is no clear answer to the question of what causes this to happen or what is this, that's when things begin to morph into the more terrifying. Skyquakes themselves are already extremely eerie, regardless if it's some mysterious force of nature in the sky, God's divine judgment, or just the result of planes and meteors. More so, it's the obsession that comes from the unexplainable, where things go off the rails. A researcher created a community to track these things he called hums. And, well, that sounds innocent, and for the most part it really is. But it's when you deal with the unknown that you also deal with the realm of obsession and delusion. The fact that you can't research these skyquakes without running into at least one or two loons screaming about the apocalypse, or calling them a sign of revelations and sounding of the seventh trumpet, or even theories regarding HAARP, or other phenomena similar, is where things get to be eerie. Because it's these obsessives who usually take things to the next level. I'm not trying to say that speculation or superstition are even a bad thing. I mean, if you're at all familiar with my channel, then you're probably already aware that I'm somebody who loves to dabble in speculation, and I like to dip my toe into the superstitious and conspiracy-ridden pool from time to time. These things are fun and interesting to dig into, and sometimes you can find a bit of truth in them as well. But again, it's where you reach into the realm of obsessives, especially surrounding the apocalypse. I don't think I need to explain how dangerous apocalypse cults have been in the past. But again, I'm not really trying to say that we have to worry about skyquake cults popping up. All I'm trying to point out is that the phenomena is strange and unsolved. We have no idea what the hell these things are, and again, if you hear this,
It's like a trumpet.
It's quite possible it will put the fear of God into you. And when you look at the people who are looking into skyquakes and the entire phenomena, it starts to resemble that of the UFO obsessives of the 60s and 70s. So as unsettling as skyquakes can be on their own, to me this mystery is far more frightening when you think of the implication of how others might perceive these things to be.
The death of Elisa Lam.
Nothing says vacation quite like a nice stay at a hotel. A home away from home. After exploring your new surroundings and sightseeing and general fun in the sun, it's also just a nice place of refuge, a temporary shelter as you're in the unfamiliar, where you can relax and unwind. And like any refuge, you'd probably want to bathe and enjoy the warm water in it. But what happens when your safety is broken? When that watery shelter is invaded, not by a person, but by black sludge flowing from the faucet, covering your body in the remains of a former guest of the hotel.
There has been 2 lawsuits in this case. The homicide was immediately dispatched to this to check to see if there's any foul play. There was some really unique video, that had been released when she was missing. The last time she was seen was February 1st, acting erratically in an elevator, pushing buttons, going outside, looking back and forth. And when you see the video initially, you're like, what is she running away from? What could she be running away from? And so when homicide was called out and they did this full investigation, it was months later and they found out there was no foul play, there was still the why. Why is she out there? And even this many years later, we still don't know that.
This was the situation that befell the guests of the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles, California, back in 2013. The death of Elisa Lam is one of the most enigmatic and chilling stories to ever appear on the internet. While it's far from the most gruesome or violent story that you can hear, it's one where the mystery behind it and its unsolved nature only adds to the terror that falls behind it. Because how do you go from being recorded by security cameras in a hotel, a place that tends to have great security to begin with, only to vanish without a trace, and be found weeks later in the hotel's water tank? Like Brian Shaffer, the Elisa Lam story is that of a Houdini act. It's a story of a woman who steps out of reality and disappears. The only difference is that, unlike Brian, Elisa was actually found. The only problem was, it was a little too late. But unlike the Isdal Woman from earlier, Elisa wasn't exactly a suspicious person with a shadowy past. Elisa Lam was a 21-year-old student from the University of British Columbia. She was known for her kind and friendly nature, and overall was someone people spoke fondly of, though beneath the surface was some underlying mental health problems, such as Elisa's more severe bipolar disorder and obvious signs of depression. One would only need to read some of her blog from the time period to really understand that.
These excuses and past disappointments do more to stop me than anything else. When I can't fall asleep at night, I'm gripped with the fear that my transcript must be a nightmare. Multiple fails and withdrawals, and 3 years with only 3 courses completed cannot look good if I intend to continue on to graduate school. I hate myself for not even being able to attend one class, and I feel it's very disrespectful to my professor, who has been so kind and understanding. Instead, I'm left to wander the streets of downtown, looking at frivolous things like clothing, but being broke, I can't buy anything and I feel so empty. What is the purpose of owning a nicely curated closet that there's no place to wear it to? What's the purpose of reading countless articles if there's no one to discuss it with? As much as I do like spending time to myself, when you're alone for so many days, it's not healthy. I know I must start exercising, but excuses. It is a weariness that keeps me at a standstill.
It's probably safe to say that under that kind-hearted veneer, Elisa was a very troubled woman. And this is what complicates her case more than anything else ever could. What makes the Elisa Lam case such a chilling yet complicated one is the footage recorded just moments before she disappeared. CCTV footage of her in the Cecil Hotel shows her hiding and panicking in an elevator, showing obvious signs of distress, but also looking around as if she's evading and hiding from some sort of pursuer. Though as you can see, no one ever appears in the video. Instead, we just see Elisa, a lone woman in distress, desperately trying to find a way to escape whatever situation she's in. In a write-up done by People magazine, it's revealed that Lam was not alone on her trip across California, and was sharing a hotel room with a few other people at the time. And when asked about it, they, as well as the hotel staff, told of her erratic and strange behavior.
According to the vanishing at the Cecil Hotel, Lam's strange behavior began shortly after her arrival. During her stay, she attended a taping of a late-night television show, but according to the police, she started acting erratically and was escorted off the property by security. Lam had also been sharing a room at the hotel with several female roommates who grew concerned by her behavior. According to the hotel's former manager, Price, Lam had allegedly locked the other woman out of the room and left notes telling them to go away or go home. She was eventually moved to her own private room. I have never spoken about this publicly, but she was being disruptive. She was leaving these notes on other guests' beds. She was writing, "Go away, go home, get out," Price shared in the Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel.
Given her pretty severe mental disorder, it muddies the water. Where does the paranoia and manic behavior of her bipolar end, and genuine panic from a dangerous situation begin? If she had simply fallen off the roof or had some other more easy to understand accident happen to her, it would be an easy to point at case and just tell it as a tragic story of someone falling victim to the delusions brought by their mental health. But here it's a lot different, because not only do we see a video of her seemingly running away from someone or some people, but it's the lack of video after it that brings all the more questions to arise, especially when paired with the way she died. Elisa would go missing shortly after this video was taken. Lam was last seen on January 31st and reported missing on February 8th. And it wasn't until February 19th where she was finally found. After guests had begun to complain about the water in their showers, sinks, and even the drinking water tasting gross and being colored with an odd blackish color, it was only then that maintenance workers of the hotel would check on the water tanks. And what they found was disturbing.
Several weeks after she was last seen, Los Angeles fire crews pulled Lam's body from the hotel's water tank on the roof. So let's turn now to CNN's Kyung Law in front of the Cecil Hotel right now. A very gruesome find, very perplexing mystery here. What more do we know about this case?
Well, let's start with the actual murder case, the actual case itself. I can't call it murder because what the LAPD is saying is they're treating this as a suspicious death. They are not calling it a homicide. What they will tell us is that Lam, a resident of Vancouver, Canada, came down here as a tourist. She arrived in Los Angeles on January 26th. Well, on January 31st, she went missing. She was last seen here at the Cecil Hotel. You've seen that surveillance video. You've seen pictures that the LAPD has sent out of her. Then yesterday, the maintenance worker, responding to some concerns about some water problems at the hotel, went and checked the rooftop's water tanks. There are 4 of them. When he looked in one of them, that's when he made the gruesome discovery. The fire department investigators have been here. They did identify her through body markings. At this point, the autopsy is still being conducted. Frederica is still waiting for that.
Inside one of the tanks, they found the body of Elisa Lam. And when an autopsy was done, it was found that she had no signs of recreational drugs in her system outside of a very insignificant amount of alcohol. Really, the only thing of note was the fact that the dosage that they found in her body of the medication she was prescribed was pretty low. And this is why this story is all the more chilling. While it's easy to rule it as an accidental death due to Elisa's mental disorder, it is the lack of footage leading up to the event and the place where she was found that makes it so strange. I mean, how does one make it to a staff-only area undetected in a hotel? An area that is locked off. And most importantly, how do you make your way up there and find a way to get into a water tank only to lock yourself inside?
The investigation continued as Lam's body was removed. The area was fingerprinted and searched, but officers came up empty-handed. An autopsy revealed that there was no evidence of a struggle, no injuries that could have led to her death, or evidence of sexual assault. Toxicology results also found that there were illicit drugs in her system. Investigations also ruled out the involvement of a third party, considering it would have been impossible for someone to force Lam's body inside the water tank without injuring her. With no cuts, bruises, or other markings, the police decided that foul play was unlikely. We have kind of a strange thing going on here, as there was nothing to support a crime of violence occurred. There was no physical evidence found, Marcia said. It raised all types of questions. How did she end up here in the water tank, on the roof of the Cecil Hotel? Do we have a crime here? What actually happened?
Police would eventually rule out foul play and close the case using her bipolar as the main factor contributing to her death. And while that is obviously a large aspect to this story, it still leaves the mystery of just how she got onto the roof in the first place, let alone inside a water tank. Even with the many theories proposed by police and other investigators alike, all of it is still just speculation. And to this day, no definitive timeline of events have been fully established. All we really know is that Elisa was a girl who struggled with intense episodes due to her bipolar disorder, and that it played a big role in what happened. But that still begs the question, how was she able to fully evade security cameras? How was she able to gain access to the roof? And finally, how was she able to make her way inside of what would become her watery tomb? These are still the questions we're left with that have no answer. Add to this the horrifying way that her body was discovered, the fact that hundreds of people bathed in and drank the remains of her decomposing corpse, and it's easy to see why the Elisa Lam case is one of the most disturbing of all time.
Springfield 3.
Oh, you lay down and you hear a car drive down the street, so you think, oh, that might be her. So you jump up and look out, or you think, gosh, what's she doing right now? Has she eaten? So when you try to eat something and it gets stuck in your throat, it doesn't go very far.
Janice and Stuart McCall can't sleep or eat. Today was one of waiting by the phone, going to the police station, and this afternoon putting up posters around town, hoping that something will break the vacuum of not knowing.
Missing persons cases are always some of the more unsettling stories to read about. And that's due to the fact that uncertainty and lack of resolution allows for our minds to ponder and fill in the blanks for us, oftentimes jumping to the worst case scenario. It's why I started the video off with the Brian Shaffer case. His story is a chilling one, because of how little we really know about it. We don't know if he's still actually alive out there or if he's long dead. There's no real connective tissue to string together a coherent idea of just what could have happened beyond, well, the uncertainty of if he fell off the face of the earth willingly or unwillingly. It just makes everything feel wrong. And even when there is some sort of hope, such as eyewitnesses seeing a homeless man in Tijuana that sort of looks like Brian, the eerie feeling of second-guessing yourself and thinking if that really is the person or not overrides any true feeling of closure that you could come to with that information. Because, as with all these cases, we just don't know the truth of the matter. Even when we know just how the story ends, such as with Elisa Lam, due to the inability to actually speak with her and fill in those blanks, just because we know how it all concludes, well, that gap in the story, that very large gap of connective tissue, once again leaves a hole in our perception. And when we can't fill that void, the unease and the fear that exist within it will slowly seep out and spread, poisoning the conclusions that were given. And it's this very feeling that lies at the heart of our last case of the night, the Springfield Three.
Today marks 31 years since the disappearance of Springfield's three missing women. On June 7, 1992, Susie Streeter, her mother Cheryl Levitt, and Stacy McCall went missing.
June 7th, 1992 would end up being a date etched in the history books, as despite it being yet another unassuming sunny day, it would mark the beginning of a mystery that 3 decades later still has yet to be solved. Suzanne Streeter, Stacy McCall, and Cheryl Levitt would each disappear without a trace. 2 teenagers and a middle-aged woman vanishing, last being seen attending parties after their graduation ceremony. All 3 of the women had plans the following day, places that they were meant to be. But at some point during the dead of night and the mid-morning hours, all 3 of them had gone missing. When loved ones arrived the next day at the residence to get together for some plans they had, that's when the initial discovery was found. This is where things begin to get a little strange, because that friend, Kirby, who was with the girls the night before as they were celebrating their graduation, would end up picking up a phone call to the house. And on this phone call would be somebody who would give out some disgusting sexual innuendos and just overall nasty, harassing comments to them. Though they would initially write this off as just being some teenage prankster, considering that Levitt had commented about there being prank calls since they moved into the house. It wouldn't be till later when McCall's mother, Janice, would arrive to the scene, looking for her daughter after she had failed to answer any calls or make any sort of communication with her. And this is when police would finally be contacted, as McCall's mother would find the house to be a very strange scene. Not only was the door unlocked and all 3 women absent, but all that was left was the agitated dog left alone, and the entire house just looked normal. Everything was there, nothing was stolen. All cars were where they should be. Yet no signs of life outside the little dog were there. And what made this all the more suspicious was the fact that Levitt's purse was still there with $800 in cash sitting inside, and for that matter, all of the women's purses and other clothing and personal belongings were still there. Things that you would take if you were going anywhere for a long period of time. And it just begs the question, why would 3 women randomly disappear in the dead of night after celebrating 2 students' graduation? Why would they abandon all their plans the next day with no sign of life or communication with anyone? And why would they leave every bit of important belonging behind in an unlocked house just for someone else to walk in? The only real sign that something was wrong was a broken lampshade, though even this is something that could be an innocent result of an inebriated person knocking it over. Something not too far-fetched to think about, considering that the 2 students were probably inebriated after the parties that they attended. And it was this lack of any real disturbance or struggle that would end up being one of the most haunting points to the case. Once again, in a write-up from People magazine, some choice quotes are given by the police.
The only thing unusual about this house was that 3 women were missing from it. Retired Springfield Police Captain Tony Glenn previously told Springfield Newsletter, "You had this feeling that you looked around and something was missing, that something had to be missing, but there wasn't, just them."
The only other thing of note at the house was a message on the answering machine that McCall had accidentally deleted when she listened to it, as old answering machines would erase messages after they were listened to. And aside from the broken lampshade mentioned before, something that could be an innocent result of an inebriated person knocking it over, there was no signs of struggle And I know I've said that a few times, but I can't stress that enough. Because aside from that, there was no other clues of note. And just like with the case of Brian Shaffer and the Isdal Woman, it was after this initial scene that the Springfield Three would end up becoming legend. Because after this, the case would just go cold, leaving hundreds of questions in our minds and giving us no real answers. Various suspects and unreliable tips would be made to the police, but again, nothing of note or substance would ever prove useful in the investigation. And outside of some speculations here and there, nothing definitive would ever come to light. Aside from a man who would call the America's Most Wanted hotline, claiming to have information, though would disconnect when the operator attempted to transfer him to the Springfield investigation team. And by 1997, years after this case would begin, the women would ultimately be declared dead, even if their case is still labeled as missing today. This lack of conclusion, and not even conclusion, this lack of a story besides 3 women vanished off the face of the earth, went poof and magically disappeared, it's just haunting. But I guess that's why the Springfield Three is still talked about today. Because it's one of the most puzzling and horrifying cases to ever become an unsolved mystery. Because unlike any of the other cases we've discussed today, there's never been any findings past the initial crime scene. And that's why, to me, it's just one of those things that keeps me up at night. Now, with all that being said, before you go, I'd like to show you something. This is my wall of shame. The list of names who keep the lights on and who pay me for simply making things I would make for free anyway. All cynicism aside, I can't thank them enough for the support they give, and honestly, it makes it all the worth more doing because, money's nice, and, the more supporters I have, the quicker I get to ditching my day job, escaping the rat race. And if you would like to help me do that, links to my Patreon are in the description. I know this video is very different from what I typically do on this channel, but honestly, that's not even that different. It's just kind of stepping away from media entirely. And no, I don't have any plans of abandoning. I know I say that every time I do a video of a new style, but you'd be surprised at how concerned people get when you just do one thing away from the norm. Oh my god, are you not going to do music anymore? Oh, you're not going to talk about video games? No, I'm still talking about everything. Just like I said earlier on in the year, I just want to continue to expand what I do and bring more of my interests and creativity out there because I have a lot of fun making these videos, and every now and again it's nice to kind of step away from the traditional tried and true of what I do on this channel. So look forward to more content regardless of what you like to see from me. I've got something for you up my sleeve, and I have no plans on stopping anytime soon. So hey, look forward to that new content. But with that being said, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, and I'll see you in the next video.